I'm going to introduce everybody. Ray and I introduce everybody. The purpose of the presentation, we'll do it in the order it's on the slide. Kelly first, Stephen, Artie, Tika, Omkar, then Natalie. Yeah, we'll just go from there.
Yep.
And yeah, just make sure you say next slide for when it's your part of the presentation. We'll go from there. We good? All right.
Yep.
I'm gonna let people in. So be ready. Make sure all our panelists are in. Me, Stephen, Kelly, we're all good. Yep, 6 panelists and me and Ray. I should do it. 34 people, and are they going to be able to? Ray, we should check and make sure that they're all muted when they come in.
Okay.
How did you do that?
So, okay. Right. So. Okay.
Mute participants upon entry and allow participants to rename themselves if they want.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mute participants upon entry, so that should work.
Are we good?
Yep.
All right. Here we go.
Let them in.
To keep an eye on that as people start to come in, they have to admit them one by one.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody. We will be starting in a minute or two, just making sure that everyone who wants to attend is here for the start. So your patience. Okay.
Keep an eye on the waiting room.
Yes.
So, good deal.
Let's do it. Are we recording this?
Yes. As we were coming in, it was recording.
Okay. So welcome everybody. My name is Kevin Collins. This is the Internship Showcase Internship Showcase presentation for computer software and web development. My name is Kevin Collins. I work at the CPDC with computer science students, undergraduate and PhD level. And let Ray introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Ray Muskorski. I am a career consultant that works with the College of Engineering undergrad students. I specifically work with ECE and material science students, as well as engineering and public policy students.
Thanks, Ray. So the purpose of the Internship Showcase is actually 2 things: to explore various job functions, industries, and career opportunities, but also to learn how to get an internship in your area of interest, which is why we set up this particular special section, from submitting your application to actually getting the offer. The panelists with us today were selected and invited by the CPDC to share their internship experiences as well as their efforts and strategies for obtaining them. And I will introduce those panelists. First of all, Kelly Yang. She's a business administration major. She was with Apple last summer. Stephen Q, a computer science major with Citadel. Ari Carden, chemical engineering with Line Systems. Tika Naik, computer science, and she was with DECA maybe, research and development last summer. Omkar Kulkarni, CS major, Jane Street Capital, and last but not least, Natalie Home, also CS at Facebook last summer, or if you prefer, Meta. So each panelist is going to present for 3 to 5 minutes, and then there will be a question and answer at the end. You can ask questions at any time, but we ask you put them in the chat We will address them, as I say, at the end of the presentations. Make sure your videos are off, audience members, your mic's muted. You can, again, ask questions at any time during the chat, and we will address them during the question and answer. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Kelly to kick things off. Kelly?
Cool, thank you. All right, well, hi everyone. So my name is Kelly and I am currently a senior double majoring in business administration and human computer interaction. On campus, I'm also a career peer mentor with the CPDC. And I'm involved in a couple of other like social organizations, and I've also listed some of my interests there as well. But this past summer, I was a user experience intern at Apple, specifically within Apple's IS&T, so information systems and technology. And they produce key business and technical infrastructure at Apple. So I was working on like creating and developing business infrastructure for Apple. If we want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so talking a little bit more about the application process. So I found the position by networking. Essentially, I was just speaking with a lot of upperclassmen and recent graduates that I knew from my organizations, and they talked about their internship experiences. And so some of them had interned at Apple and had interned within this organization. So they offered to refer me. So I'd spoken to many people, but another person had also like referred me to another person that worked at Apple. So I definitely recommend like just networking and speaking with as many people as possible. But yeah, so after I was referred, a recruiter reached out to me with a little bit more information about the program. And I emailed the recruiter back with responding to their short questionnaire. And this just included questions about like my interests, like my professional interests, my professional background, and then also just a copy of my resume. And then in terms of the interview process, so I went through 3 interviews within a timeline of about 2 weeks. The first one was just like a 15-minute like phone screen with the program managers. And then after that, I ended up speaking a little bit more with a team manager. And then finally, a couple weeks later, I had an interview with the UX team manager. So I would say that, like I mentioned before, like direct network was really helpful with the referral. Even if you don't know anyone that works at a company that you're interested in or works in an industry you're interested in, just always ask your friends or like ask like those people to refer you to other people that might, you know, be working at a company you're interested in or in a role you're interested in. And not only that, but I think networking is also so important for like interview advice and also like for portfolio/resume review. So I had to send in my resume, and I also went through my portfolio and my interview with the UX manager. So I, you know, wasn't too sure how that would work. And so it was helpful to have like mentors and good friends that would help me kind of like review my portfolio and my resume before the interview process. And then in terms of my internship experience, so I worked on one main intern project on the UX team throughout the summer. And so essentially like that process included like first conducting user research, and then doing some like synthesis and designing and prototyping, and then finally user testing that and presenting to my team. And then so I translated my research findings into high fidelity design decisions and then presented that. And I also participated in other intern programming as well. And just reflecting on my internship, I learned a lot about the company and industry. It was my first time working, you know, at a big tech company, and it was super interesting and really fun. Also, I did a lot of networking at the internship, which was really helpful in like learning more just about my interests within design, because I think a lot of people had roles that I didn't know about, and it was like always really nice like talking to them and hearing about their career paths. Yeah, I was just like really grateful for the support, and I had a lot of mentorship available to me, which was really nice. And in retrospect, I would have networked more with the team. So, like I said, it was like really helpful just like learning about the team and their backgrounds. But like I didn't have that much time. So I didn't think it was that important. Like I didn't emphasize it as much as I should have. But yeah, if you're interested in a similar experience, don't be afraid to ask and continue networking.
Thanks, Kelly. That's great. Let's turn it over to Stephen. Stephen, take it away.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So yeah, hey guys, my name is Steven and I was a software engineering intern this summer with Citadel Securities. So a little bit about me, I'm a computer science major. I'll be graduating in the fall of 2022 with a concentration in computer systems. In my free time, I like to play the acoustic guitar, soccer, and I have a YouTube channel that I started last year. So a little bit more about Citadel Securities. I know when I was like a freshman, I wasn't really familiar with what they did or what a market maker was, but they are a market maker, which means they provide liquidity and price improvement to the market. So like, when you want to buy groceries, toilet paper, stuff like that, you go to Walmart, you go to Target to get that type of stuff. And you don't have to go to a physical other person to get that trade. And the same thing happens with stocks. When you place a trade on TD, Ameritrade, Robinhood, somebody needs to like take the other side of that trade. And that's what Citadel Securities does. And they take on that risk by accepting your trade, and based off the spread, which is kind of like a difference in price during different times of the day, they make profit off of that. So I worked on the CES team, which is the Citadel Execution Services team, and this handles about 47% of the US retail volume. So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the application process. So yeah, I first was introduced to Citadel through like campus recruiting events and friends. And the interview process is when you apply, you send in a resume and everybody receives a coding challenge. So I know some companies will only send the coding challenge if you pass that resume screen, but not Citadel, they send it to everybody. And based off of these two, the resume as well as your performance on the coding challenge, which is usually just like 2 problems on HackerRank, you get moved forward into the technical phone screen round. And this is typically 1 to 2 phone screens. They tell you 2. If you do well on the first one, they'll probably just move you straight to the final round. If they think, you're maybe something was a little weird, they need some more confirmation, they might schedule you for a second one. And so the final round for me, since the pandemic, was online. And so it was 3 Zoom interviews, so about 1 hour for each. So I think it came out in the end to maybe like 3.5 hours total. So the first one, it's just like a full technical interview. This is what you typically expect, your algorithms, your coding interview. And then the second interview is half of that is going to be the same as the first one, another coding problem. But the other half is kind of behavioral, where they're going to ask you about your resume, some of your experiences, your interests, kind of evaluate if you're a good cultural fit. And then the third one for me was a system design interview. So this is kind of like design a system. How would you think about this problem? How would you build this big system? What concerns you have? What trade-offs you need to consider? Stuff like that. So it's definitely not required, but it is helpful to have a basic knowledge of the stock market. I kind of ran into this issue with my system design since I had no prior knowledge and I didn't do too great on the system design interview, I feel like. So if you have some prior knowledge of how an exchange works, or if you're interested in this field, it could definitely really help you just get some context with the questions they might ask you. But once again, I didn't have any knowledge in that field and I was able to pass the interview, so it's not required. So yeah, you can either work in the Chicago or the New York City office. You can also choose to work on the Citadel side, which is asset management, or Citadel security side, which is the market making side. I personally chose to go to Chicago because that's the headquarters and work on the market making side. So there I worked largely in C++. I know that CMU doesn't really teach C++, but it's not that hard of a transition from C, and all the people there are very friendly and helpful. So I worked on a full stack project and mainly in distributed systems. A little bit more detailed, I developed a UI that used React to monitor real-time session information on the front end. And on the back end, I use C++ to help synchronize with the clients and the servers to provide better fault tolerance to their overall system. Because if their systems go down and you can't communicate with clients, every second, that's a revenue being lost. I also implemented asynchronous communication that sped up the TCP messaging by over 36%. And so the experience there, I would say, is like very interesting. It's pretty fast-paced work. I think I worked maybe around 45 hours a week, but I never felt like I was bored or doing any sort of like, like brunt work. Everything was like very very interesting, and I was learning a lot throughout the whole thing. And you definitely make connections with a lot of smart and talented developers. Because Citadel is a rather small company with maybe around 1.5K employees on the security side, they can be very like selective with who they choose, and you get to learn from essentially the best in the industry. And I was just from the internship side of things. I'm definitely biased, but I do believe it's one of the best, if not the best, internship experiences. Citadel's pretty famous for giving out amazing swag. They give you an iPad Pro, AirPod Pros, all that stuff. They take you out to really nice events, Michelin star restaurants. They flew us out to Florida for a week to stay on a resort. And without the pandemic, I'm sure there's other activities. So they really treat you really well and make you feel valued, and you get to have a really nice experience in a large city. So yeah, overall, I really enjoyed my experience.
Thanks so much, Stephen. And let me turn it over to Ari.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'm Ari, and my role was as a front-end development intern at VNI Systems. So a little bit about me: I'm a sophomore, and I'm planning to study chemical engineering and human-computer interaction with a CS minor. I'm also currently a biomedical engineering major, so I'm still kind of figuring things out with that. And I really enjoy being involved on campus. So for example, I'm a career peer mentor with the CPDC like Kelly, and I'm also the president of Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, and I'm involved in Senate. So I do a lot of different things. I love being involved on campus. In my free time, I love to listen to and play music. I love to read, draw, watch anime, work out, and learn new things. So a little bit about my internship. I interned at VNI Systems, which is about 80 employees, and it's an AI startup that is one of the creators of the human-centered AI field. And it was founded by the ex-CEO of Infosys, Vishal Sikka, who I actually got to interact with during the internship. So that was really great because this is such a really important person in the field. And it was really great to be able to work with him and also a lot of other really experienced people there. Next slide, please. All right, perfect. So a little bit about the application process. So I learned about VNI because my dad actually works there as a full-time employee. And he had told me that their front-end development team was looking for an intern. So I asked him to forward along my resume. And after that, I interviewed with one of the developers on the front-end development team who asked questions about my previous experience, and he would later become a mentor at the company. So an interesting thing about VNI is that their kind of application process is pretty informal. So apart from larger companies that will have like multiple interviews and they'll have coding tests and tons of things like that, VNI, since it's a pretty small company, will usually just have like the one interview or maybe a little more than that, and they'll just kind of gauge your experience from there. All right, next slide. So some of the details of the internship. So I worked on a fairly small team of experienced full-time employees that came from a variety of different backgrounds. So there were front-end developers, back-end developers, UI and UX designers, data scientists, etc. And I was actually the only intern on the team that I worked on. So that was a really great experience. Because even though it would have been great to also interact with other interns, I think that I really gained a lot from working with full-time employees who had a lot of experience and kind of being mentored by them and learning from them. I think that that was a really great and really unique experience. So I can't disclose specific details because I had to sign an NDA and everything is kind of confidential, but I was working on one of INI's most important and high-level projects, so that was also really cool. And the things that I were doing was developing user-centered artificial intelligence and machine learning web applications. And another really interesting thing was that I worked with JavaScript, React, Redux, HTML, and CSS. And I had never used any of those before the internship. So My mentor kind of told me a couple of weeks before the internship, here are some of the things that you'll be working with. And then I kind of did some research on my own. He sent me some resources and I was able to learn about those things from there. And I really enjoyed that because even though it was a little daunting at the beginning, oh, I have to work with all these things that I have no experience with. It was actually really fun to kind of learn on the spot. And the people that I was working with didn't really expect me to be super experienced. So they were kind of willing to help me learn and willing to teach and mentor. So that was really great. And I came out of that with a lot of experience that I hadn't had previously. And I'm kind of proficient in those languages now. So I think that that was really great and really hands-on practice. So reflecting on the experience, I was obviously very grateful for the opportunity to learn from experienced professionals, especially since all the languages and libraries that I worked with were completely new to me. Something that I wish that I had done differently was that I took Concepts of Mathematics or 21127 and had a part-time job at the same time as this internship. And for people who have taken concepts, you probably know how intense it can be, especially during the summer. So if I hadn't put so much on my plate simultaneously, I think I might have been able to learn even more from my time at INI. And even though I really enjoyed taking concepts, I really enjoyed my part-time job, and I obviously really enjoyed the internship. I think that if I'd done them separately or at different times, then I would have been able to learn more from each experience and each activity. But on the bright side, doing all those things at the same time kind of forced me to manage my time well because everything was really time consuming and really difficult and used a lot of brain power. So it was really helpful to kind of manage my time, especially because I'm taking so many technical classes now. I have to kind of compartmentalize everything in my mind and prioritize my time with so many difficult things on my plate. So some advice, if you're interested in pursuing this type of opportunity, definitely make use of your network and ask questions about your family, friends, etc. to do for work. I'm always asking my dad about what he's doing, the projects that he's working on, because I'm really interested in Vionice company, especially after I've interned there. And that was kind of how I got my internship, because I was asking him, do they have any internship opportunities there? Is there anything that I could help out with or work on? And that was kind of how I was able to send my resume in and how I was able to be reached out to for an interview. So definitely utilize your network. That can be your family, that can be your friends, it can be CMU alums that you reach out to on LinkedIn or on CMU Universe. I'm going to quickly represent CMU Universe here. If you haven't heard of it, it's an alumni platform where you can interact with CMU alumni and request informational interviews and all sorts of things. So definitely make use of that if you haven't already. And that's a really great resource for networking and possibly even finding internships. And then another thing that I would advise you to remember is that for many internships, they're not expecting you to have prior experience with everything you'll be doing. Probably most internships are not like mine, and they're not expecting you to learn everything new. They're expecting you to at least have a little bit of experience, but there are definitely some like mine that kind of expect you to learn everything on the spot. So most internships are definitely meant to be learning experiences. So they don't expect you to have a ton of prior experience. If they do expect you to have prior experience, it's kind of basic knowledge or basic projects. And you kind of have to be open to learning and sometimes having to ask questions and ask for help. That's something that's really important. And internships are obviously meant to be learning experiences. So don't stress out when you're applying about, oh, I don't have all of the qualifications on this list. You'll definitely be fine, and you'll definitely be able to learn a lot of the things on the job and kind of make use of all the mentorship that's available at your internship. So yeah, that's all that I have. And thank you for listening. And I'm looking forward to hearing all of your questions.
Thanks so much, Ari. And I apologize for butchering the name of INI at the beginning of this. My apologies. So let me turn it over to Tika and tell us about her experiences.
Yeah, so I'm Tika. I'm a sophomore studying computer science and considering maybe doing like a business / like a business ideate minor. And then like going into the internship experience, I had like Python, C, and a little bit of like SQL knowledge. Some things I do on campus, I'm a major member of study labs and also part of like women at SCS / SCS for All. And so the past summer I interned at DECA, Research and Dev, which is like a research and development company. So it's organized a little bit differently than most companies. So there's a lot of projects that are kind of being worked on by the DECA employees, and there's not a lot of cross communication because all of these projects are like really selective, like only people who are working on them are allowed to know the details. So the thing I worked on was a home dialysis machine. I can't talk too much about the specifics, but I did sign an NDA. But what I worked on was like the cloud software. So getting kind of the machine information to the cloud so like your doctor and stuff can see it. And DECA as a company is pretty small. It's like around 800 people and like 50 of them were interns. So it was a really high intern population and it was an in-person experience up in New Hampshire, which was really exciting after having like a whole remote year of schooling pretty much. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the way the application process went for me was I found DECA randomly on LinkedIn. Like I was just applying to places and this popped up. And I really liked kind of the work that I would be doing. And I thought I fit most of the requirements or like I could learn that by the time like the actual summer came. In terms of the application, it was very straightforward. It was just a resume, like no cover letter or anything. And then once I got past the screening, the only thing I really had to do was a technical phone call. So it's a little bit more hardware focused because I was supposed to be on like a embedded systems team. But the class that came in helpful the most was like 15122. A lot of the things that I learned in that class were really applicable to like the technical phone interview. And then in terms of like a lot of the other interns there, a lot of them knew like family or friends or like ex-interns, but I didn't know anyone at the company. So it's like pretty, I guess like no matter who you know, it's still possible to get into companies. And then one other thing that I really had to like learn to deal with was negotiating about like location and dates because I ended up like having to live there in New Hampshire for the summer. So I managed to negotiate like how my whole living situation would work and like how my dates and like when I would kind of get started would be. So the application was a little bit of like a long process, but it ended up happening throughout like all of April. And yeah, next slide, please. So a lot of what I was doing at DECA was AWS and like cloud stuff. So it involved setting up a new AWS account for the team. And my main project was actually updating an internal project to like let the hardware engineers see what was going on in the cloud. So it was like a 2000 line Python script that kind of had to be updated and improved and like made way more efficient and just like better. And I did a little bit of hardware stuff, but like at least I learned a lot about it. And kind of the whole process of being like an intern there taught me a lot about AWS, which I would have never gotten like a hands-on experience on that scale before. Agile development, which is something that like I've heard about before, but never got to like see in like actual companies being used. And I got to learn a lot about like proper testing documentation, which are good habits that are like coming in handy during classwork because it is FDA regulated since you're working in medical devices. And then kind of my final takeaways from my whole internship experience. Well, first, I realized that like a big scale project like this is nothing like working on like a class project or even like a multi-week assignment or something. Because you never get to see like, I don't know, like working on a project where your team member is doing something in a completely different language or completely different side of the same project that you kind of all work together. It's a really good learning experience. You also get to do hands-on stuff with things that get to change people's lives. Like we're working on medical devices, which is really exciting because this would eventually go into someone's house and help them live a better life. One big thing I wish I did was talk more to other interns. So I was the only intern on my team, but some of the other teams had like 10, 15 interns. And I wish I took the time to reach out and make more friends and kind of just get to know them because they're from all over the country. And so one big piece of advice and kind of the last thing I want to say is take your time with learning. So you're going to be at an internship for maybe like 2-3 months. And when you're working on something like what a lot of big companies are doing, like this is a code base that's taken like years and years to develop. And you're not going to learn it all in like a week and start like fixing all their problems. So you really want to take it as a learning experience and start kind of just like absorbing knowledge before you can start doing things, because you really want to take this time as like a learning experience. And so yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask it during the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Tika. Awesome. Let me turn it over to Omkar.
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Omkar. I am a senior studying computer science, and I was working at Jane Street this past summer as a software engineer, and I'll be returning full-time next year. So if you have any questions about full-time employment there as well, I'm happy to answer those. A little bit about me. As I said, I'm a senior. I like to play soccer in my free time. I've been learning how to golf. And I also recently have decided to work on getting my pilot's license. Yeah, and then I guess a little bit about Jane Street. Like Stephen mentioned earlier about Citadel, Jane Street is a market maker which specializes in ETFs, which are exchange traded funds. Yeah, and they're like one of Citadel's competitors, I guess. Um, Software engineering at Jane Street is basically like working on the systems that execute trades for the traders who work there, or working on trader tools to help them visualize data they might find useful. Here on the next slide. So yeah, the application process for Jane Street is, I think, kind of atypical in that, like, basically you can just apply online or go to some event that Jane Street has. The referrals don't really do, like, getting a referral doesn't really do much for the application process. It doesn't even guarantee you an interview. But the nice thing is that when you apply, it's guaranteed that like an actual physical person is looking at your resume and making a decision, as opposed to some sort of online tool trying to parse it and like do some sort of screening. So basically, yeah, you just have to submit a resume and either a cover letter or fill out the Why Jane Street field on their website. I would recommend just applying through the website. It's the easiest way instead of going through some other portal. If you can go to a networking event that Jane Street has, there was one last semester. I'm sure there will be more in the future. It's a pretty good way to meet people, meet the recruiters. And the interview process is basically 2 rounds, 1 phone interview. It's a 45-minute technical interview. The interviewer might ask you a few questions about yourself, but it's primarily like a coder pad interview. And then the on-site interview is 3 technical rounds over the course of a day. And it's like 2 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. And you get like 3 different interviewers, and they just ask you like design questions, and then they ask you to write code for the problems they ask. And yeah, like I said, referrals are just if they're really undecided on you and you have a referral, that's where a referral might come in handy. But in general, like, don't bank on like trying to network and getting an interview that way. So yeah, what I was doing at Jane Street. So we have 2 projects that we do with 2 different mentors on 2 different teams. So it's like 2 different halves. You kind of get to see a little bit more of the company that way. They try to like take you from business focused to more like software engineering heavy roles, so that you can get an idea of both. You're welcome to do whatever you want if you joined full time. So in the first half, I was working on more of like a techie kind of thing, where I was working on the map reduce implementation that they have for compliance and reporting the trades to like regulatory authorities. And in this project, I used Kafka to speed up data processing by several CPU hours. And then in the second half of my internship, I was doing market data visualization for options. And so as part of this, I got to learn a little bit of options theory and work with the traders to see what the business is about, what like the business focus people actually want from the products that we make. Yeah, and then I guess the first half was remote, the second half is in person, and this summer and going forward, I believe it'll be mostly in person. And my takeaways, yeah, I guess everyone at the company is really helpful and technically skilled. So you should just ask them as many questions as possible, get to know, learn from their knowledge, learn from what they have to say. They have like really valuable experiences, and everyone comes from like different backgrounds. So they'll have like different ideas and different like things they can help you with. So yeah, I guess one thing that I will say, I guess it's not like a completely, this is what's worked for me. And I think that it's a good way to go about like utilizing an internship for the maximum benefit, is to like meet as many people as you can, and don't just like sit at your computer and like work and write code. Like a valuable part of the internship is getting to know the company culture and a little bit more about like the other teams and other things that the company does, which you might not be able to just get by sitting at your computer and like looking at whatever code you're writing. So yeah, it's like my suggestion is like, don't just focus on the work, but also focus on getting to know the company.
Thanks, Omkar. And for the final presentation, let me turn it over to Natalie.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about my software engineering internship at Facebook. I know it's called Meta now, but we're just going to stick with Facebook. So I am Natalie. I am a senior studying computer science with a concentration in security. I'm on the SCS for All and Women at SCS committees. And you probably know what Facebook is. It's a social media company with a few different products. They hire interns for software, engineering, hardware, data science, and probably more stuff. So as for the application process, it starts with applying online on their portal. It's just your normal tech internship application. And for the interviews, it starts with a code signal test. And then you have two 45-minute technical interviews. They have like 2 questions each time, like an easier and a medium one. And then there's no behavioral portions. The Facebook Wayfinder event is not actually a part of the application process, but it is something that I was able to experience. It is invitation required from Facebook recruiters, but basically it's like a 2 to 3 day thing that happens in the summer for people who are interested in becoming interns or working full-time at the company. And they have a few different panels, and you get to talk to you get to hear people talk about their experiences applying and their experiences working there, and they actually give you advice on applying from recruiters. And sometimes you can sign up for like a 10-minute chat session with an engineer. So it was really interesting for me. And so like 2 summers ago, I participated in it virtually, and that's why I wanted to actually intern at Facebook last year. So that's kind of what pushed me to apply to the company. Once you actually get a internship offer, they'll ask you for your office preference. There are a couple different offices that Facebook has in the US. They have like New York, Boston, DC, LA, Silicon Valley. They have a lot. And then they also have you fill out a team match form where they ask you whether you want to be like a front end or back end engineer. And they basically try to team match you as best as they can. My virtual experience meant that I couldn't get to try company food, which was kind of sad, but I was able to intern on the cloud gaming infra team, which is a backend engineering team. Cloud gaming is basically a service that they provide where instead of you downloading a whole gaming application onto your device, they have it on their servers and you're just like streaming the game. My project dealt with stress testing. So I was developing like tools to allow the team to stress test, which meant that I was working with Python and PHP and many different internal tools. I was able to work with a great intern mentor, and I had 2 peers who are basically software engineers that are also on the team. I was able to talk to my mentor's manager and various production engineers. I was able to sit in on large and small team meetings and also security meetings because I told them that I was interested in security. And I also had many one-on-one meetings with my mentor and my mentor's manager regarding my progress at my internship. There were a lot of company intern events. Most of them were to get to know the company. And then there was also a lot that was just for fun because they wanted to make the virtual experience fun for us. So they had like virtual magic shows and virtual escape room events, and it was really fun. On top of that, we had like weekly team socials with just the team, and sometimes we had extra team socials in some weeks where we did stuff like we had a Zoom call and we ordered Blue Apron and we were all just like cooking in our kitchens and talking to each other and like cooking the same recipe. And there was also weekly company-wide Q&A sessions where we asked like Mark Zuckerberg, the company voted on like the top 5 questions they wanted him to answer every week, and he would do that. As for my reflecting back on my experience, I felt like I really got to know the company, even though it was a virtual internship. I felt super integrated into the culture. It was really social and open and just a lot of fun. And I did have to do a lot of I did have to do a lot of learning because my project specifically had me work with all sorts of like back-end processes. And so every week I was learning like a new internal tool, and it was kind of stressful, but I gained a lot out of that. I think that during the internship, you should definitely not be afraid to ask questions that might like you think might be stupid or might make you look like you don't really know a lot, because it's really all about learning and they don't expect you to have all of that knowledge, and people will be like very happy to help you. And as for advice on getting sweet internships, if you really want to have an internship at like a large tech company, I think the number one thing to be aware of is that you have to apply really early, or at least that'd be like, it's like super helpful to apply right when all the applications come out, which is actually in like June, July, or August, which it's not in September when school starts. That's already getting like a little bit late. But I have a lot to say on this topic. So if you want to, you can check out my YouTube channel that I made specifically to talk about like the internship finding process and other CS related stuff.
Great. Thanks so much, Natalie. So at this point,
Kevin, you're muted.
thank you for just gabbing away. Yeah, is questions. So I don't know if panelists were getting questions doing their talk, direct messaging, but if so, you can address those now if you'd like, or just open it up for anyone if they want to put questions in the chat for the panelists. They would be glad to address those. So not a big response. Let me put a question out there, and this, anybody can chime in, any of the panelists. What was the most, if you were to like name one particular resource or strategy that was most successful in getting your internship, what would that be? And it looks like somebody put something in the chat already that's a little bit connected to that. But anybody can jump in and just, again, what would be something you would tell somebody, yeah, this is, if I had to say one thing, this would be what I would tell you to do.
Hey, Ori.
Okay, so I can answer Kevin's question, and then I can also answer Joey's question in the chat. I'm not really qualified to answer questions about backend engineering because I'm on the exact opposite end in terms of what I worked on. But yeah, I can answer those questions. So as for what I would say for the most important thing for my internship, the most important takeaway that I had is definitely always be open to learning and definitely always be open to asking for help. I know that there's a big stigma around asking for help. Like if you ask for help, that means that you are not competent, but that's not it at all. And sometimes when you don't have a lot of experience with what you're working with, but you're working with full-time professionals who have a ton of experience with that stuff, it's totally okay to ask for help. And it's totally okay to say, I don't know what I'm doing with this project, or I don't know what I'm doing with this line of code. I don't know how to fix it. And you can definitely ask for help and nobody will look down on you for doing that. And it's also always a learning process. So if you have extra time, extra free time, definitely do some research about the things that you're working on for your internship. I know that personally, I obviously did a lot of research and online practice with the languages that I was using because I had no prior experience with them. But I also did a lot of research into kind of the philosophy of the company, because one of the things that Vi and I really prioritizes is the design thinking philosophy. So I did a lot of research into that and user-centered design and kind of how that originated and what are the key tenets of those philosophies. So definitely always be open to learning and always be open to asking for help. And then the other question that I was going to answer was, if you've already applied like through some form, is it still worth reaching out to a recruiter? And I would say yes. if you can find a recruiter, or if there was like contact information given on the application, or if you can find that person on LinkedIn or whatever, definitely reach out to them, because we can kind of get your foot in the door even more. So yeah, I will let people answer other questions now, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I can address Laura's question about backend engineering and maybe like the security minor stuff from Clarice. So for backend stuff, I would say we don't really, I think we might have like a web dev course at CMU, but I definitely never took it. I mostly worked with like Python stuff, and knowing like web things is useful because we don't really like, they don't really teach you that type of stuff in the normal courses. Like I do think that some parts of 213 was useful. I had taken distributed systems. I think some systems classes would be great. Also like networks, that type of stuff would be, or like databases. That's kind of really what backend engineers focus on. I hadn't ever used PHP, and Facebook had like their own version of it. So it was kind of different for me to like learn that type of stuff on the job. So I would say like look into some of those. I mean, it's like not that hard for you to learn new languages, but stuff like that. In terms of like security, I have a concentration in security. I don't know what you want, like what you're specifically asking about, but I would say the Intro to Security class is a great start to see like if you're really interested in like that realm. They have like three different units that you go through. Some of it is like web security, some of it is like more like, I guess, 213 type stuff. And some of it is like cryptography, like if you're into like blockchain things, that's definitely in the security realm. And like, you know, encryption, RSA, all that type of stuff. So yeah. And if someone else wants to go, I know there's a lot of questions.
I was just going to answer, like, I guess, a couple of the earlier questions. So for things that were helpful to prepare for the work in the internship, I would say, yeah, systems courses in general were very helpful for me. Cloud computing, while it is a lot of work, was pretty useful. Distributed systems, also useful. Compilers, I would recommend a lot of the systems courses personally, but take whatever you feel comfortable with. And I would say like at least one is going to be useful. And then for the person who asked about like still getting an internship right now, I would say it's definitely possible. Like I've gotten an internship, my first internship, I did the interview in March and got the offer in April for an internship that same summer. I know like cycles have been getting earlier and earlier over the years, but it's definitely still possible. Apply through Handshake, that's how I got that one, or just apply online, reach out to recruiters. And yeah, I'd say it's definitely possible.
I kind of want to add to that one. So when I did my second internship, I didn't end up applying until like end of March. And then I heard back in April, and things got wrapped up in April for the May internship. And I think that like, even though it seems like other people are getting them super, super fast, there's still so many people who do get them later. So it's not like a race or anything. And I think some good resources are, I think like at least for CS, Kevin ends up sending like the resume book around, and I sent my application in there. I was still getting like responses through that while I was like, still looking. So definitely keep an eye out for like CNU specific like sources, because the recruiters know that like they want to come to CNU and get like CNU talent. So even if it is like later than you would think, it's still definitely really possible to get internships like in April. And I think like even end of April as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tika. That's exactly right. Especially now with everything virtual, I think a lot of companies that never really thought they had a shot at Carnegie Mellon students are now realizing that everybody's in the same boat. They have to do everything virtually, so it doesn't really cost anything to post internships. So the fact we're having a career fair next week, and a 2-day career fair that's mostly internship focused indicates it's definitely not too late. And to Tika's point, yes, there are companies that even in May, they're contacting us and saying, yeah, we just found we need an intern, or we just got funding for it. Anybody available? So yeah, you don't want to ever just stop looking. Check with your career consultant, and they can give you some resources and tips to help you even when it feels like the season's over.
Yeah, I just wanted to also add on to that real quick. Yeah, so like Kevin mentioned, the career fair, I think that's a really great opportunity. I actually got my first internship at a career fair, and I kind of want to highlight this thing like a timeline for each company. Generally in the earlier months, like in the fall and even the summer, that's kind of like dominated by the quant and big tech companies for the recruiting process. And the other companies know this, and so like startups and smaller companies that freshmen are usually going for, they know this, and they will keep on looking for people even in the spring semester, and that's where your kind of opportunity comes up after like the recruiting process for big tech kind of passes. I also wanted to just address some of the questions here about how to buff up your resume. I put a shameless plug for one of my YouTube videos, but I just did want to talk about it a little bit. So like, some things you can do, like CMU has really great research. The professors are really nice, and you can just usually email a professor and get a research position. That's a really great experience to have on your resume and something to talk about with recruiters when you're applying. And hackathons, I think there's one coming up at CMU, and PenApps, stuff like that. Hackathons are also really great to kind of like boost up your college experiences when you're just coming from high school.
Excellent, thank you. That's great advice.
Yeah, building off of that, I don't think anyone has answered the question about how to best prepare for technical interviews. So I'm just going to talk about a few resources that I really like that you've probably heard of. So definitely, I know that for some people, reading textbooks and reading lots of writing about different types of data structures and things like that is really helpful. But personally, for me, I only learn through examples. No matter how much I read a book, I really don't learn until I start doing practice problems. So if you're like that, definitely do practice problems. There are tons of websites out there where you can do coding problems that are actually really similar to what you might be given in a technical interview or a coding test. So definitely utilize some of those. One of the ones that I really like is HackerRank. They also have a 30-day coding challenge that I'm doing right now. So if you're a little not really experienced with coding, or if you just want a bit of a refresher, that could be really helpful for you. They have it in a variety of different languages. I'm doing it in Python 3 because that's one of my main languages, but they have it in a lot of different ones. So definitely utilize that. There's also LeetCode, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, which is really similar. There's Code Academy, which kind of has coding courses and it'll have you do projects. There's Coursera, where a lot of colleges provide free classes. I took one from University of Michigan about Python, and a lot of them are free, so definitely use that. And there's a ton of other things that you can find. So definitely do practice. And if you are the type of person that learns from reading textbooks and reading lots of writing, then definitely do that as well. And then building off the questions about how to buff up your resume, I would definitely recommend doing campus jobs. I had actually never had a job, part-time or otherwise, until about April of 2021, I think. And then I found a job that was with the CMU and Oregon State's team for the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. And I worked as a data labeler, just kind of doing that type of work for the research project that they were working on for that competition. And ever since then, I've had a ton of different campus jobs, including being a recruiter mentor with the CPDC. And I can definitely attest that having campus jobs really helps you learn a lot of skills that'll be useful in your internship, even if they're things that aren't really related to the type of internship you specifically be doing. They can really bulk up your resume, and they can really provide you with a lot of skills, a lot of experience, and you can meet a lot of new people. And it's just a really great time. So if you have a little space in your schedule, I would definitely suggest looking on Handshake for campus jobs. There's a specific filter that you can use for campus jobs, and you can just go ahead and apply to a few that interest you. And I definitely recommend doing it if you have the time. And yeah, that's all I have for now.
I guess I wanted to address like the question about, do I think side projects were important in getting the internship? It definitely gives you like a place to start. Like first, it's like a major like vouch for your skills and talents that you claim to have on your resume. Because you can say, wow, look at this like website I made, or look at this project that I did that like shows off that I know Python and like a few algorithms and data structures and stuff. And I think also like some of the questions that I've gotten, or like at least in some of the beginning interviews, they really ask you about like, what have you done to show your interest in technology or like in programming? And this gives you a place to really start the conversation with them. And I think also like doing things like hackathons, it just kind of helps you improve your own skills, which kind of works as a way for you to practice the kind of technical things that will be coming up in like your actual internships and in like the coding interviews as well. And I think also like by doing a project, you can kind of show your interviewer that like not only do you know how to write code, you can also like think about like the design of a project or think about the bigger picture and like work on something from start to finish, which is something that they usually look for like beyond just like your pure technical skills. So I think it's a really good place to start. Like hackathons are fun, they're easy in terms of like it's just a weekend or two. And like other ways of getting side projects, I guess, beyond hackathons are you can like work on something you're on your own. Like if you're really interested in like making a Chrome extension or something, you could do that. Or you can like join clubs, like another shameless plug, but for Scotty Labs, like we work on APIs and stuff. So if you want to join, you get to like put technical skills into use to make something, you can kind of talk about that. So yeah.
I think we're running up against the end of the session. So if there's nothing else, I want to thank the panelists. You all were fantastic. The advice was amazing. I'm glad I attended because I learned things too from people who actually did the search. So very appreciated. This is recorded, so it'll probably be on the CPDC YouTube channel when we upload it. But thank you all for attending. Keep working with the CPDC. We have the resources and help, and everybody have a great night. Take care.